will be in 2 Samuel chapter 3. I'm planning on doing 3, 4, and 5. We will see how time works for us tonight. But yeah, if you would, go ahead and turn in your Bibles. 2 Samuel chapter 3 is where we'll start. I'm going to give a quick recap of what we talked about last week. Like I said, this is a running story, and so it's just good for us to remember where we're picking up. So at the very beginning of 2 Samuel, David learns about the death of Saul. He learns about Saul's death from a very unexpected messenger. An Amalekite came to David claiming to be from Saul's camp and to have killed Saul. David was grieved by the news, even though Saul had been trying to kill David for over a decade or so. David then had the Amalekite killed on account that the Amalekite claimed to have killed the king, which was the Lord's anointed. And David, that was the penalty for killing the Lord's anointed. Then David was anointed king over Judah, just Judah, while Saul's son Ishbosheth, who we hadn't really heard about before this, but he was made king over the other 11 tribes of Israel by Saul's commander, or the commander of Saul's army, whose name was Abner. David then moved out of Ziklag, which was the city that he was living in Philistine territory, and he moved to Hebron, which is in the middle of Judah, and he set up his kingdom there. We ended with the story of David's army and Saul's army going to battle against each other. David's men were led by Joab, which is David's nephew, and they had the upper hand in the battle, so Saul's men retreated. They were led by Abner, and they retreated, like I said. Joab's brother, Asahel, ran after Abner as they retreated, but he was apparently unarmed and was killed by Abner. We will find out more about that here in a second, or in a little bit. Abner then took the high ground and called to Joab, saying, hey, we should end this battle so we can stop the killing. No one else needs to die. This was Israel versus Israel, by the way. This was a civil war. And he said, hey, let's stop the senseless killing. I had made the comment that it was pretty much, it seemed like he was losing, and he's just like, hey, we should stop. And this was his way of saying we should stop, or they should stop. Joab agreed, and they all quit fighting. Unfortunately, Joab was on seemingly what would be the verge of victory, and had he not quit, what we'll read in verse 1, which I read last week, probably would not have happened. If you look at verse 1, it says a long war ensued, and so yeah, that probably could have been avoided, but Joab gave up and did not finish the task, and I kind of talked about that last week. So that's the recap. I'm going to pray, and then we will get started. God, thank you just for this evening. Thank you for this time. Thank you for your word. God, as we read these stories and just learn about the lives of these men and just everything that's happening and just the craziness that is, God, you are in control of all of it. And so I pray that we can just see your hand in this. I pray that we can glean things, information, and just things that we can apply to our lives to make us better. God, I pray that we can see the errors and learn from those. God, I pray that we can see the victories and learn from those as well. And so just help us, speak to us tonight, and just have your way here. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So chapter 3 starts off, I'm just going to say this too. Reading this, you would think David, he was anointed king all the way back in 1 Samuel 16, right? And it wasn't like, hey, he's anointed king, and he's like, all right, here I am. It was a long time. He had to go fight the giant, had to go fight Goliath to kind of prove himself and win over the Israelite people. Saul then gets jealous, and so he's running from Saul for over 10 years. And finally, at the end of the last book and the beginning of this book, Saul's dead, and you think, oh, okay, now David can move in. But no, not even close. It is messy, it is sloppy, and the things that happen, like, it's just, yeah, there's a lot of drama here. There's a lot of death, a lot of killing, a lot of violence, and it's not just a quick succession to the throne. David has to wait and wait and wait, and finally gets there. And then once he gets there, he's David and makes some poor choices, but makes some good choices too. But we'll learn about all of those. The Bible does not pull any punches. David is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he is the most covered character in the entire Bible. Like, there is more about him than anyone else. Abraham has a big chunk, but David has, there's a lot on David. And then you go into 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and it talks about David as well. There's basically the dual books going on. And so the same thing that we're learning about here, you can learn about in 1st Chronicles as well. So pretty cool. Anyway, here we go. Abner is going to join David, but we are going to look at chapter 3. Now there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David, and David became steadily stronger, while the house of Saul became steadily weaker. Sons were born to David in Hebron. Here we go. I'm great at names, so bear with me. The first was Ammon of Ahinoam, the Jezreelitess. The second was Chileab by Abigail, the widow of Nabal, the Carmelite. The third was Absalom, the son of Michal. Remember that name. He's going to come back. He's a big character in this book. The daughter of Talmaiah, king of Jeshur. The fourth was Adon-Ijah, the son of Haggith. That's a beautiful name. The fifth was Sethatiah, the son of Abidal. And the sixth was Ithream. That's a cool name, actually. By David's wife, Elga. These sons were born to David in Hebron. Now, he just moved to Hebron, and so he's there for 7.5 years. These are all of the sons that are born to him during that time. You'll notice not one of them has the same mother. There's 5 different moms there, 6 different moms there. If anyone knows their Bible, you're not supposed to have multiple wives. That's a no-no. You go back to Genesis, the very beginning, Genesis chapter 2, and it's one man, one wife, cleave together. The man leaves his mother and father and joins. And even in Deuteronomy, before kings were even a thing, God foresaw or knew and gave provision and said that a king should only have one wife. And so here, David is making some poor choices. And out of these poor choices, one of them is Absalom, who is going to cause a lot of issue. David is going to be on the run once again, this time not as an innocent man, but as a guilty man from Absalom. And so, not great. David's demise and downfall mainly, I think, has to do a lot with his failure to have one wife, his failure to control himself around women. That seems to be a bit of a theme. We'll talk about that here in a second. Actually, by a second, I mean right now. So, verse 6, Abner joins David. Now it happened that while there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner was strengthening himself in the house of Saul. And Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah? Sure. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Why have you gone into my father's concubine?" So, when I said before a long time ago that Saul only had one wife, it only records Saul having one wife. He clearly has one concubine, which obviously wasn't good, but David had many wives and many concubines. We'll see about that. But Rizpah here, one thing that I learned while studying this is that the wife of a king was basically royalty, and I guess this then applies to the concubines as well, but no one could lay with the wife or the concubine of a king. That was high treason. The only person that could do that was the next king, unless it was like your mom, then that'd be weird. But in this case, if it was David, David could have, and I think maybe does, take the wife of someone else, but that is plausible. But here, Abner, it seems as though when he's strengthening himself, might have been trying to get himself into a place where he was possibly the number one guy. I don't know, that's me assuming, but there, Ishbosheth calls him out and says, "Hey, why are you doing this?" And listen to Abner's response, verse 8. Then Abner became very angry over Ishbosheth's question and said, "Am I a dog's head that belongs to Judah?" Dogs in the Old Testament are usually not a good thing. I love dogs, and so when I hear this, I'm like, oh, dog's head, scratchy behind the ears. But dog's head, this was an insult. He's saying, am I a dog? Am I the scum of the earth, essentially, that belongs to Judah? Today, I show kindness to the house of Saul your father, to his brother and to his friends, and I have not let you fall into the hands of David. Yet you call me to account for wrongdoing with that woman. Now note that Abner does not say, "No, I didn't do that," or "Yeah, you're right, I did that." He just calls Ishbosheth out for calling him out. He is mad because he called him out on such a matter. And he's like, man, why are you bringing this to me? I'm the guy that put you in as king. Like, I could do whatever I want, and here you're bringing this silly accusation. And he's getting mad. Essentially, it seems though he got caught with his hand in the cookie jar, and now he's kind of guilty and trying to blame someone else. But again, never admits that he did it or doesn't. But it goes on to say this, and this is very interesting. Verse 9, may God do so more to me, or more so, as if the Lord has sworn to David. I do not accomplish this for him, to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul to establish the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, even Dan, or from Dan even to Beersheba. And Ishbosheth could no longer say a word in response to Abner because he was afraid of him. Now, Ishbosheth got shut down. He was quiet. Remember, last week I said that this man seemed to be a bit of a coward. Here, Abner, the military man, like probably a pretty stout and sturdy dude, was coming at him, and Ishbosheth's like, yep, nope, you're right. I didn't say anything. Forget that I said that. But he is afraid here. Now, it's interesting, though, where Abner flips the script, essentially, and jumps over to Team David. Like, oh, you're going to call me out? Well, I'm just going to go over to David's team. And he says that the Lord is going to transfer over the kingdom. Like, I don't know when Abner had this revelation that David was supposed to be the king, and if he was just grasping to try to keep it in the house of Saul and keep the power there because he had some power already, and he's like, I know I'm established in the house of Saul. I don't know about David, so I'm just going to keep this going. But Abner essentially jumped ship, and why? Well, because of a woman. Again, this seems to be a common theme. Women ruin everything. Just kidding. That's not true. Rather, foolish men who cannot control themselves around women ruin everything. Here, Abner was probably in a good spot. I mean, this is the Lord's provision, but Abner, fooling around with a woman, gets in trouble and has to jump ship. David, we'll see, gets in trouble with Bathsheba, runs into some problems. Anyway, verse 12, here we go. Then Abner sent messengers to David at his place, saying, whose is the land? Make your covenant with me, and behold, my hand shall be with you to bring all Israel over to you. Now, this is his promise. He's saying, hey, I'm going to be the guy. I'm going to go and get everyone else to rally behind you. All of Israel is going to rally behind you. We'll see that this actually happens here in a little bit. But verse 13, and David, said, good, I will make a covenant with you. Only I require one thing of you, namely that you shall not see my face unless you first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come to me. Remember, a long time ago, David's first wife, and should be only wife, was Michal, Michael, however you say her name. I say Michal. You get some little rasp in your throat there, real Hebrew. But Michal, that was David's first wife, and he's saying, hey, I want her back. As if the other 6 women that he just had kids with wasn't enough. He needs a 7th wife, apparently. But this is his true wife. I will say this, it was Saul's daughter, which in some ways would make him like the next in line, the prince. And so that gave him some royalty in the fact that he was Saul's son-in-law, and then maybe a more rightful heir to the throne. There might be a less conflict amongst the other people. So this could be a political move. This could just be David wants more wives. I don't know. But that was his request. And so David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, give me my wife Michal, to whom I was betrothed for 100 foreskins of the Philistines. Remember, he was supposed to bring 100. David, being a cool dude, brought 200 foreskins. Good on you. And so Ishbosheth sent men and had her taken from her husband, from Patiel, the son of Laish. That, if you remember, I think it was chapter 25 of 1 Samuel when David married Abigail and Ahinoam, that it said at that time Saul, I don't know if it was just a commentary, but Saul essentially had given Michal away to this Patiel guy. But it says this, and so Ishbosheth, again being a coward, he's like, oh, I don't want to make David mad. I'm going to go ruin this marriage and go get my sister from her new husband. And so it says this, and her husband went with her, weeping as he went as far as Bahurim, Then Abner said to him, go, return, and he returned. So Abner's like, hey, dude, stop following her. She's not your wife anymore. And yeah, he was sad. Like, poor guy, innocent man, just married somebody and then got taken away. But so David got a new wife. Verse 17, though, and here's where Abner comes good on his word. It says, now Abner had a consultation with the elders of Israel, saying, in past times you were seeking for David to be king over you. Now then, do it. For the Lord has spoken regarding David, by the hand of my servant David, I will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from the hand of their enemies. Remember, David was the one that defeated Goliath. He was the one that did kind of save them from the Philistines. And so David at that point should have maybe stepped up as king, and Saul maybe should have stepped down, but there was not that transition. There was a good 10 or so years that went in between. But it said this, Abner, verse 19, Abner also spoke to Benjamin, and in addition, Abner went to David in Hebron, went to speak to David in Hebron everything that seemed good to Israel and to the entire house of Benjamin. So apparently everyone was like, I'm kind of good with this. This Ishbosheth guy, not too fond. David, yeah, I could probably see him as our king. Even the house of Benjamin, which is where Saul is from. That's Saul's house, Saul's people. This would be Ishbosheth's people. They're like, yeah, let's get that guy out. Maybe David can move in. So it seems as though things are moving in. David isn't saying this has to be, but Abner is the one that's pushing for it. David's just like, all right, yeah, I'll go for it. But verse 20, then Abner and 20 men went with him and came to David at Hebron, and David held a feast for Abner. What a turn of events, right? Abner was one of Saul's commanders that for 10 years was helping Saul pursue David, and then Abner set up a rival king, and then Abner, because he got caught with his hand in the cookie jar, is like, well, I'm going to be on your team, and David's like, all right, come hang out with me, I'll make a feast with you. But they're hanging out, right? They're good with each other now, but that's okay. David sees probably the value in this move politically, and just now he has one less person trying to kill him and off him and usurp him as king. So this is a good thing. And David held a feast for Abner and the men who were with him. Abner said to David, let me set out and go and gather all Israel to the Lord the king, or my Lord the king, so that they may make a covenant with you, and that you may be king over all that your soul desires. So David let Abner go, and he went out in peace. Right? So Abner went to David. David held a big feast, and Abner's like, "Hey, let me be your guy. Let me go be your champion, and just get everyone to rally behind you." And David's like, "All right, go." And he sends him off in peace. However, that doesn't sit well with this guy named Joab. It says in verse 20. In verse 22, it says, "And behold, the servants of David and Joab came from a raid and brought a large amount of plunder with them. But Abner was not with David in Hebron, since he had let him go, and he had gone in peace." It says, I think 3 times that Abner left in peace, meaning that David had no issue, was all about it, and just like, yep, go ahead. But 23, when Joab and all the army that was with him arrived, they informed Joab, saying, "Abner, the son of Ner, came to the king, and he has let him go on his way, and he has gone in peace." So they tell Abner, Joab. Joab was Asahel's brother, and Abner had killed Asahel in battle. So it wasn't like he just murdered him, unjustly. This was in battle, he killed him, but Joab was not too pleased. But then again, Joab was the guy that said, "Okay, let's stop fighting," and walked away from Abner when he had him cornered. But I digress. It goes on to say, verse 24, "Then Joab came to the king and said, 'What have you done?'" He is not pleased with David's decision. "Behold, Abner came to you. Why then have you let him go, so that he has already gone?" He's like, this was your enemy. You should have captured him and just killed him, taken him out, or kept him in a prison or something. But verse 25, it says, "You know, Abner, son of Ner, that he came to gain your confidence." He's saying he's just here to trick you. He's just here to lure you in and make you think that he's on your side. He's really not. Really what he's here to do is to learn of your going out and your coming in. He's here to watch you and to take notes so that he can go back to his king that he put in place, Ishbosheth, and tattle on you and essentially give him insider information and find out everything that you were doing. So Joab here is not pleased, and he's blaming it on a more strategic method, but we'll see his heart here in a second. It goes on to say, verse 26, when Joab left David's he sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him back from the well of Sirah, but David did not know about it. So Joab goes off. It says, hey, Abner, you forgot something. Come back. And David doesn't know about this. And Abner's like, okay. So when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside into the middle of the gate to speak with him privately. And there he struck him in the belly, so that he died on account of the blood of his brother Asahel. Again, it doesn't seem like he really cares too much about the strategy. More, he just wants revenge for the death of his brother. His brother was killed in battle by this guy. His brother was pursuing him. Abner said a few times, like, hey, buddy, stop pursuing me. Otherwise, your brother's going to be really mad when I kill you. And Asahel's like, nope, I'm just a fast runner. I'm going to catch up. And he died. And now Joab is mad. But Asahel essentially stabs him in the stomach and kills him. It says 28, afterward, when David heard about this, he said, I and my kingdom are innocent before the Lord forever of the blood of Abner, son of Ner. May it turn upon the head of Joab and on his house, or father's house. May there not be eliminated from the house of Joab someone who suffers a discharge or has leprosy or holds the spindle, or essentially a walking stick, or falls by the sword or lacks bread. So Joab and his brother Abishai killed Abner because he had put their brother Asahel to death in the battle of Gibeon. So apparently, this is interesting. Apparently, Joab was too valuable for David to actually punish him by killing him or doing something like that. Instead, he just pronounces a curse on Joab and his family, and that's it. I will say that Joab was David's nephew, and so maybe that plays into the equation a little bit. Maybe that's why he spared him. But nevertheless, he did spare Joab. And Abner wasn't a king, so that also could weigh into it, because when the Amalekite killed King Saul in battle, David had that guy killed, but this is out of battle. This is murder, like plain and simple murder. Actually, that's what the title of my Bible, Joab murders Abner. I didn't read it because I didn't want to spoil. Spoiler alert, honey. But David mourns. Spoiler alert, David mourns Abner. So here we go. It says this in 31, then David said to Joab and to all the people who were with him, tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn before Abner. And the king, David, walked behind the bier. The NLT says this, and it makes sense because I don't know about you, but I don't know what a bier or a bier, or whatever that word is, B-I-E-R, whatever that is. The NLT said David walked behind the procession to the grave. Essentially, they're having a funeral. This is the only detailed occurrence of a funeral. There's funerals in the Old Testament, but this is the only detailed funeral in the Old Testament. And so David is walking behind the funeral procession, and it says this in 32, and they buried Abner in Hebron, and the king raised his voice and wept at the grave of Abner, and all the people wept. And the king sang a song of mourning for Abner. Again, he did the same thing for Saul and Jonathan. He sang a song. This one's a little bit shorter, but still, this was not a guy who was very friendly to David for the most of David's life. It was just the last few days that he seemed to be loyal, and he's mourning Abner. Should Abner die as a fool dies? Verse 34, and your hands were not bound, nor your feet put in bronze shackles. As one falls before the wicked, you have fallen. Essentially, he's saying this guy was innocent. This guy died, unfortunately, and this is a bad thing. And all the people wept over him. Then all the people came to provide food for David in his distress while it was still day. But David vowed, saying, may God do so more to me, and more so if I taste bread or anything else before the sun goes down. So essentially, David is fasting for the rest of the day. He is mourning and grieving the death of Abner, this man who died unjustly, and so he's fasting. Verse 36, now, and because of this fast, it says this, now all the people took note of David's vow, and it pleased them, just as everything that the king did pleased all the people. So all the people and all Israel understood that on that day it had not been the desire of the king to put Abner, son of Ner, to death. And so they're like, oh, David is mourning this. Like, clearly this was not his intention. David did not have this man assassinated. David is innocent. This was not a political move or anything like that. 38, then the king said to his servants, do you not know that a leader and a great man has fallen in Israel this day? And I am weak today, though anointed king, and these men, the sons of Zeruiah, yeah, you can say it, I can't. Zeruiah are too difficult for me. May the Lord repay the evildoer in proportion to his evil. And so again, Abner is dead and David is not pleased. But like I said, there's a lot of bloodshed. It's very sloppy. We're going to get into more bloodshed. Don't read the title of chapter 4 because it's going to spoil it. But chapter 4, here we go. Now when Ishbosheth, Saul's son, heard that Abner had died in Hebron, his courage failed and all Israel was horrified. I don't know why his courage failed. It could have been because he sees that Abner's dead and he's like, oh, maybe Abner was loyal. But if they're killing Abner, what's going to stop them from coming and killing me? So again, he's a cowardly man, it seems, but his courage failed, and then all of Israel is horrified. But verse 2 says, and Saul's son had two men who were commanders of troops. And the name of one was Baanah, and the name of the other was Rechab, sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, sons of Benjamin. For Beeroth is also considered part of Benjamin, and the Beerothites fled to Gittaim, and have lived there as strangers until this day. I think that's a little bit of a foreshadow for what's going to happen. I think in 2 Samuel 21, we'll get there in a little bit, many weeks. But I will say the Beerothites are one of the tribes that tricked Joshua from destroying them when Joshua was going through and conquesting in the book of Joshua. And so they were allowed to live. Some guys came up and they're like, look, we're so destitute. But they made themselves look that way. And so Joshua was like, we'll have pity on you. And then they tricked them. And so Joshua spared them. And now they're still here. Apparently now they've joined essentially the tribe of Benjamin and live alongside them. Now here's a random aside, but it said this, verse 4, now Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son who was disabled in both feet. He was 5 years old when the news of Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel, and his nurse picked him up and fled. But it happened that in her hurry to flee, he fell and could no longer walk, and his name was Mephibosheth. And so just a random little note there, what does that have to do with anything? I think that is put in there. One of my Bible study Bibles said that was put in there just to let us know that, spoiler alert, Ishbosheth's about to die. This is why the next in line doesn't get put in. He's a cripple, not a very valiant king, and so they just kind of overlooked him, but that's why. And essentially, when Saul and Jonathan had died, remember that the Philistines were coming and taking a lot of land. And so Saul's people, they got the news. They're like, oh, we got to get out of Dodge because they're going to take over our land. And so in a hurry, she grabs him, probably trips and falls and drops him. And then he is now crippled in both feet, or disabled in both feet. But that is Mephibosheth. And we will see that David actually spares him later on, but not the rest of the house of Saul. But going back to the story, verse 5. So the sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, Rechab and Baanah, departed and came to the house of Ishbosheth in the heat of the day while he was taking his midday rest. I've seen so many memes that say that we should take naps because Jesus took naps, and then it references Jesus sleeping in the boat. But here, I don't know. This guy was taking a midday rest, and it didn't turn out too well. So you be the judge of whether or not naps are okay. That's up to you. If you're in the middle of a boat, maybe it's okay. If it's a hot day, maybe not. I don't know. But it says this, verse 6, they came to the interior of the house as if to get wheat, and they struck him in the belly, and Rechab and his brother escaped. Now, verse 7 is going to go into detail and essentially recap what they just did and restates how they murdered him, so don't get confused. It says this, verse 7, now when they had come into the house, as he was lying on his bed in his bedroom, they struck him and killed him, and they beheaded him, and they took his head and traveled by the way of Arabah all night. And so that's the same two guys. They went in, stabbed him, cut off his head, and then took it as a trophy. verse 8, they brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron and said to the king, behold, the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, your enemy. Look at this great thing we've done, who sought your life. So the Lord has given my lord the king vengeance this day on Saul and his descendants. They're thinking that this was a good thing. Does this remind you of anything? Maybe somebody in chapter 1 who came and said that he had killed Saul, and how'd that turn out? Well, let's see. But David replied to Rechab and his brother Baanah, sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, and said to them, as the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life from all distress, when the one who informed me, saying, behold, Saul is dead, that being the Amalekite, also viewed himself as the bearer of good news. So this Amalekite came and thought he was giving good news. He's like, hey, you guys think you're giving good news? So did that Amalekite. Remember what happened to him? If not, you're about to find out. So it says, I seized him and killed him in Ziklag, which was the reward I gave for his news. What's the reward they're going to get for their news? How much more then when wicked men have killed a righteous man in his own house on his bed? Shall I not vow or now require his blood from your hands and eliminate you both from the earth? So David was like, hey, Saul died on the battlefield and was killed by somebody, still not right. But this guy, you killed him in his bed while he was sleeping. Like, what? Like, that's not righteous. That's not valiant. That's not anything. That's terrible. Like, shame on you. And so, it says verse 12, then David commanded the young men, and they killed them and cut off their hands and feet and hung them beside the pool of Hebron. And they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in the grave of Abner in Hebron. So one could argue, again, that the Amalekite should not have been put to death because Saul had asked him to kill him. However, this was murder, plain and simple. What they did to Ishbosheth was murder. Saul died on the battlefield. Ishbosheth died taking a nap in his own bed. Once again, David was not pleased with this senseless killing. And again, someone killing a supposed enemy of David to gain favor with him, but that is not what the king wanted. And I will say this, to take this to our King Jesus, he does not want us fighting or killing or doing any of that stuff to our enemies. In fact, we do the exact opposite, right? He says that we are to love our enemies and to pray for those who persecute us. That's very different than many of the other world religions or other kings that say, hey, go and kill all my enemies and I will reward you greatly. But Jesus says, pray for those people and love on them. In fact, the only person in regards to Jesus that died was Jesus himself. He goes out, like when all the other ones are saying, hey, kill them, he's saying, no, I will die. I will die in your place so that you don't have to. I will shed my own blood and lay down my own life for you. That is the king that we serve, a king of love, a king of grace and mercy, one that wants peace, not one that wants us to go around killing people or blowing people up or doing all these senseless acts that don't win any souls, but loving people and sharing the gospel, the good news, is how we win souls. And so, chapter 5. David made king of Israel, and then he's going to move to Jerusalem. So here we go, chapter 5. When all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, all the tribes came. Behold, we are your bone and your flesh. They're saying, hey, we are your people. We're Israelites just like you. You're an Israelite. We're Israelites. We got this going on. Verse 2, previously when Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel in and out. Remember, David was made commander of Saul's armies, and he had great success. After defeating Goliath, he went in and out and fought all sorts of battles for Saul. And Saul was pleased with him for a short amount of time and then became jealous. And the Lord said to you, you will shepherd my people Israel, and you will be a leader over Israel. So all the elders of Israel came to the king at Hebron, and King David made a covenant with them before the Lord in Hebron. Then they anointed David king over Israel. So now, I think it was 2 years that Ishbosheth, it said, was king. Now, 2 years later, why are you sending me pictures while I'm teaching? Sorry, random. Don't look. It's awkward. Anyway, but David was now anointed king over all of Israel, not just the tribe of Judah, but all of Israel. again, I'm not sure if the elders came to David in response to what Abner had said. I think that's kind of the case, is Abner had rallied the troops and they're like, yeah, that sounds good to us. Remember chapter 3, verse 19, Abner came and said, hey, everyone's good with this, even the tribe of Benjamin. I will say it could have also been the fact that Ishbosheth is now dead and they're like, hey, we need a king. Hey, David, how's it going? Convenient. We're here. So you could see it that way. It could be both, that it's now just Ishbosheth's out of the way and David was the guy, and so now this has happened. But really, I think that the unfortunate death of Ishbosheth was just something that happened, but that they were actually going to. But that's conjecture. Who knows? But it does say in verse 4 that David was 30 years old when he became king. Someone else was 30 years old when they stepped into a very prominent position. Oh yeah, Jesus. That's right. When he started his earthly ministry. That's interesting. 30 years old. And he reigned for 40 years. At Hebron, he reigned over Judah for 7 years and 6 months. And in Jerusalem, he reigned for 33 years over all Israel and Judah. Now the king and his men went out. Oh, sorry. So that's just kind of a quick little summary of the kingship and the reign of David. He was 30 years old, essentially dies when he's 70 as king still. He was in Hebron for 7.5 years, and then in Jerusalem for 33 years. But verse 6, now the king and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, and they said to David, so just so you know, this is Jerusalem. The city of Jerusalem is not controlled by the Israelites at this point. It was essentially when Joshua was conquesting the promised land, they tried, I think it was Joshua chapter 15, they tried to take over Jerusalem and failed. And so like, we'll just come back later. Many years later, David now comes back and is like, hey, I'm going to set up my kingdom there. And so that's what's happening. But the Jebusites have control over it, and they say this. They say, you shall not come in here, but even those who are blind and those who are limp will turn you away, thinking David can't enter in here. Essentially saying, hey, our city is so well fortified. Jerusalem was built on a hill, is built on a hill, but was back then as well. Built on this nice hill and very well fortified. That's why Joshua couldn't take over it. And these Jebusites are like, hey, this place is so well fortified. Even like blind people and lame people like Mephibosheth, they probably could defend against you guys. Like, we don't even need guards to defend against you. Like, this place is impenetrable. We'll find out that they do. Penetrated. So here we go. Nevertheless, that's a great word. Verse 7, nevertheless, David did what? He captured the stronghold of Zion. That is the city of David. Jerusalem is known as the city of David because David's the one that conquered it and took it over and set up Jerusalem, the true Jerusalem, and set up the kingdom. And so this is David's city. He's the one that renovated it and built it into this great city that it was back then. And David said on that day, whoever strikes the Jebusites is to reach those who limp and those who are blind and who are hated by David's soul through the water tunnel. That's a weird thing, but essentially, if you look at 1 Chronicles 11, it tells this story as well. And David's like, hey, anybody that goes up and whoever is able to overtake the city, I'm going to make them commander of my army. Yeah, it doesn't actually say that in this account. Maybe some translations do say that, but in 1 Chronicles 11, it says, I'm going to make that guy commander. And who does it? Joab, right? The guy who David probably should have punished, probably should have ousted. Maybe this was his way of saying, hey, someone else can take Joab's place. But Joab's like, no, I got something to prove. And so he goes and proves it. Now, it says through the water tunnel. We don't really know exactly what that means, but it seems as though there was like a tunnel that had water in it, rightly named, and they snuck in through there and somehow were able to penetrate the city through the water tunnel. And it says then, so Joab got victory and David pronounced him as the commander of his armies still. But it says, for that reason, people who are blind and people who are limp shall not come into the house. Again, we don't really know exactly what that means, but I think most commentators, it was saying that essentially saying Jebusites, those people who claim like, oh, hey, even the limp and the blind and all those people could defend, essentially referring to the Jebusites, saying those people are not allowed to come into Jerusalem or into this city. So they were banned. So David lived in the stronghold, and they called it the city of David. And David built around from the Millo and inward. Essentially a Millo, I forget exactly what that means, but it's like stilts. Jerusalem being built on a hill. You can't build houses on hills, otherwise you'll be walking around like this. So you have to build stilts and like fill it in. And so David like essentially fortified the city, built like stilts and platforms to build houses on. I guess I was reading about it in one of my Bibles, and it said that it had to be constantly updated and renovated, and just upkeep was often just because of rain and weathering and stuff like that. Otherwise the city would just crumble. But this was a pretty cool city on hills, or on stilts essentially. And David's, we'll see here in a moment that he's going to get a house, but his house was built on the top, which gave him this very great view where he could see out and see all sorts of stuff. Unfortunately, one of the things that he saw was some lady bathing on her roof. Didn't turn out too well. We'll get there later. Spoiler alert. Anyway, verse 11, it says this: Then King Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David with cedar trees, carpenters, and stonemasons, and they built a house for David. And David realized that the Lord had appointed him as king over Israel, and that he had exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people. And so this was like proof to David, like, I have been established by the Lord. God has blessed me. What's the very next verse? It says, Meanwhile, David, he took more concubines and wives from Jerusalem. Good job, David. Come on now. At David's height, when he could have just been great, and instead he's taking things that he shouldn't be taking. He's seeing women and just adding. And this is what kings did, but God did not want this to be. And again, we'll see these sons, some of these, one of them is Solomon, but from these sons, more drama, more issues. One of those, again, is Solomon, which is foretelling of Bathsheba, because that is who Solomon's mother is. But meanwhile, David took more concubines and wives from Jerusalem after he came from Hebron, and more sons and daughters were born to David. Now these are the names of those who were born in Jerusalem: Shumau, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua, Nepheg, Japhia, Elishima, Eliadada, and Elielaphatata. That last one is accurate. Anyway, you can read those and you can pronounce them all however you want. But verse 17 says this: Now the Philistines heard that David had anointed. Now the Philistines that. So let's read this one more time. Now when the Philistines heard that they had anointed David king over Israel, all the Philistines went up to seek out David when they heard about it, and then he went down to the stronghold. So remember, David was living with the Philistines, and for a while he was kind of a hired gun. He was a hired soldier, and really he wasn't a problem. Like, they made him king over Judah, but whatever, that's his own people. And so the Philistines still maybe thought he was friendly, but now he's king over all of Israel. And they're like, oh, this guy's kind of problematic. He's taken over Saul's kingdom, and now he's the main guy. Like, I thought he was friendly to us, but now he's a threat. And so they see him as a threat, and so they're going to move in. So David went down to the stronghold, which is there in, I believe that's in Jerusalem, just the stronghold of the city. Now the Philistines came and overran the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord. Hey, that's a good thing. What did David do? He sought the Lord. He inquired and said, shall I go up against the Philistines? Will you hand them over to me? And the Lord said to David, go up, for I will certainly hand the Philistines over to you. Then David came to Baal Perazim and defeated them there. And he said, the Lord has broken through my enemies before me like the breakthrough of waters. Therefore he named the place Baal Perazim, which essentially means master of breakthroughs, or Lord who bursts through. Baal, though he was a pagan god, that is just a word for like Lord or master in general. Some of the names, actually Mephibosheth, his name in Chronicles is something Baal. Mirab Baal. And essentially they change it because maybe confusion of the god Baal. That's not a Baal, as a lot of people say, but it's actually Baal. But anyway, just so you know, that's what that means. But not a pagan thing. David there is not worshiping a pagan god. And it says this, verse 21, this is very interesting. And the Philistines abandoned their idols there, so David and his men carried them away. Do you guys remember a long time ago when Joe was teaching in 1 Samuel chapter 4, the Philistines defeated Israel, and what did they do? They carried off the ark, right? They carried off Israel's idols. Well, not Israel's, but Israel's idols. Here, the script has flipped, and now the Israelites have victory and are carrying off the Philistines' idols. I don't think this is meant to be understood that David and his men used the idols and were trying to worship them or anything like that. I think they were more so just cleaning up the mess, but they said, hey, those idols, we're taking those and we're destroying those and taking those out. Very interesting. But verse 22, it says, now the Philistines came up once again and overran the valley of Rephaim, or Rephaim, however you say it. They're back, essentially. So David, what did he do? He inquired of the Lord again. But he, the Lord, said, you shall not go directly up. Circle around behind them and come at them from front of the baka shrubs, or mulberry trees, or mulberry shrubs as some translations, or poplar trees as some translations. I've never heard of a baka shrub, but I have heard of mulberry and poplar, so there you go. And it shall be, verse 24, when you hear the sound of marching on top of the baka shrubs, then you shall act promptly, for then the Lord will have gone out before you to strike the army of the Philistines. Then David did so just as the Lord had commanded, and he struck and killed the Philistines from Geba as far as Gezer. Which is where all the old people live. Just kidding. No, it's not. But I will say this. If you remember Joshua, we've talked a lot about Joshua tonight. If you remember Joshua, the first place they go is Jericho, and he has an overwhelming victory. What's the very next place? Ai, or Ai. I was listening to how you actually say it, and it wasn't AI, but I like AI just because AI is the downfall of many people. No, I'm just kidding. But he went into AI. What did Joshua not do? He did not inquire of the Lord. And he was, in Joshua's defense, he's like, hey, God give me victory. I'm just going to keep running with it, right? And he ran with it. And there was this guy named Achan who was not a good guy and caused the whole tribe of Israel to be Achan when they got defeated by Ai. But here, David, actually, this is a good job, David. Instead of going on that victory and like, oh, I already beat those Philistines once, let's just go out and beat them again, do the same thing, run the same play, guys. Instead, what does it say? Verse 23, he inquired of the Lord. And God said, the Lord said, hey, don't do it the same way. Instead, actually, what I want you to do is wait. So God, when we pray, he answers in three ways. You guys know this, right? Yes, no, and wait. And in this case, he said, wait. He said, wait for my signal. Don't get overzealous. Don't go rushing in. Wait. Now, David, when he fought Goliath, it said that he ran forward. He ran towards him. God said, go, and David went. This time, God said, hey, wait. Wait till you hear the signal and then attack. And that's exactly what he did. And I will say this. I don't know what you have going on in your life. I don't know all the ins and outs. But I will say, if you are praying about something and God is saying, wait for my signal, wait for his signal. Don't rush in. Don't create more issues. Just wait. God's timing is perfect. And if he says wait, then you should wait.